Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is Emily here, and I have a fun and easy watercolor technique for you using stamped images. I've got a piece of Canson XL watercolor paper here and some distress oxide inks. I've got wilted violet, spiced marmalade, twisted citron, worn lipstick, and peacock feathers. And I've got this little piece of cardstock that I have laminated for my palette, and I go ahead and smush each of these ink pads onto it. And I'm also using a number 12 round brush and an oval wash brush. I use the wash brush to soak the back of, or the front of this Canson XL watercolor paper to get it nice and wet so that the ink, when I place it down, will move freely. I've got that round brush. I am picking up some of the purple and placing it onto that paper, and as you can see, the water just helps it to move nice and freely. And then I've got some pink that I will be using, and I just come in with each of the colors, and I try to not put two colors next to each other that would create a muddy mess when they touch. So I try to be really careful about that when I am placing the inks down. I think this combination turned out really pretty. I don't think I've used it before, but I need to remember it because it was really pretty and the colors just worked really well together. So I went ahead and heat set that with my Wagner heat gun to make sure it was nice and dry. And I've got some water on this brush, and I'm tapping it on my finger to splatter some water on top of it, and I let that sit for a few seconds and then use a paper towel to soak up that water, and you can see it lifted some of that ink off. And then I've got this Perfect Pearls mixture that I have made, and I put it into a spray bottle. It's just Perfect Pearls and water, and I spray that onto that watercolor piece to give it some shine. And I've got some Wicker White Folk Art acrylic paint here, and I mix some water with it on an acrylic block, and I use the edge of the acrylic block to splatter that white paint onto it. And it was a little bit too light with it all watered down, so I ended up going back in with a little bit more full strength and splattered some more on there to get it more vibrant and a little bit more opaque. And then I've got that panel all finished, and here you can see that. And I love how that turned out. And I've got another piece of cardstock here. This is my Cougar 110 pound cardstock and my Sizzix circle die set. I picked one of the circles and I die cut that, and I trimmed it down to 4 1/4 by 4 1/4 inches. And I've got some acetate here by Graphics. I just bought this on Amazon a long time ago. And then I trim or cut out a piece that will fit perfectly behind that window, and use some 1/4 inch Scor tape to adhere that acetate down. I'm sure by now you can tell that I am making a shaker card. So I've got that Scor tape here, and then I will use my Tim Holtz craft pick to remove the release paper. And I go ahead and place that acetate down on top of that adhesive and make sure that I press it in really well to make sure that it stays adhered nice and strong. And then I've got my EK Tool scoring board, and I'm getting ready to score a card base, and decided that I didn't want it to be white, I wanted a craft card base. So I brought that in and scored it at 4 1/4 inches. And I will trim that down after it's creased to make a 4 1/4 by 4 1/4 inch note card. And because that other panel was 4 1/4 by 4 1/4, I trimmed down 1/8 of an inch off of each side so that the circle would still stay centered. And then that would give me a little bit of a border on the outside of that panel when it's adhered onto that card base. And this stamp set here by Stampendous, Life Words. Friendship isn't a big thing, it's a million little things. And I've got my MISTI here, so I go ahead and place my card base in there, make sure that I have it oriented right so I don't stamp the sentiment upside down on there. I've done that before, and that's not a fun mistake to fix. So I place that acetate panel on there so that I get it all lined up and make sure that I stamp the sentiment where I want it to be so it's nice and centered. I line that sentiment up, and then I pick that up with the door of my MISTI, and then I will remove that shaker window panel and then treat that cardstock base with an anti-static powder bag, and I will ink up the stamp in Versamark ink and stamp that down lightly. And then I will use my Hero Arts white embossing powder And this whole time I've been doing this, I have my heat gun heating up so it's nice and hot so it melts fast and doesn't warp the paper as much. So I'm heating that with my Wagner heat gun, and when that's all smooth and melted, then I go ahead and set that aside. And then I will bring in the stamp set by Simon's Stamp. It's the Spring Flowers stamp set. And I will be using an acrylic block and some Versamark ink. I will white heat emboss all these images as well, so I'm treating that watercolor piece with an anti-static powder bag. And I pick up quite a few of these flowers and I place them randomly onto that watercolor piece so that each flower has different colors in it. And after I've stamped those down, I add that Hero Arts white embossing powder. And I was going to try and continue stamping, but I really didn't want to mess up that embossing powder that I just put down, so I went ahead and heat set that before I moved on with any other stamping, and then I heat set in between each stamping that I did. And I repeated that with most of the flower images that were in that set. So then I've got the coordinating dies here, and I will line those up and adhere them down with purple tape and run them through my Sizzix Big Kick machine. I did that off screen. And I did want to get your opinion, so if you wouldn't mind leaving a comment and letting me know if this would interest you or not. But I think it would be so fun if my husband did a voiceover for me on one of my cards at some point. I think it would just be comical and a fun change of pace. So if that interests you, just go ahead and let me know down in the comments. So here I've got some Scotch 3M foam tape, and I pulled off quite a long length of it, and I folded it on top of itself, and then I cut that in half, so it's about 1/4 inch wide. And the double thick just makes the shaker bits move around freely, and then I remove the release paper, which makes that foam tape bend easier, so you can just bend it right around that circle, and it's nice and easy to do. And then I sealed that off and added the rest of the foam tape to give it the rest of the support that it needs. And I've got some iridescent rhinestones here. They're meant for nails, but they're just so pretty, so I wanted to use them, and the colors were perfect for those Distress Oxide inks that I used. So I've got some pink and blue, purple and white ones that I placed down. And then I have also got some, they're kind of like micro iridescent rhinestones, I guess you could say. They're really small. And I placed those in that mixture of the other rhinestones. And then I went ahead and placed that acetate window over top of all those rhinestones, and then I pressed firmly to make sure that there were no gaps so that the rhinestones wouldn't try and escape. And here you can see those colors, and they're so pretty. And then I took all of these die cut flowers and I placed them around to kind of create a wreath. And once I was happy with the placement of all those, I grabbed some Glad Press and Seal and I placed that over top and used my nail to burnish those in and make sure that they were stuck on that well enough that I could flip it over and add some adhesive to the back of those. I used my Acetate permanent tape runner adhesive, and I placed that down and used some light pressure to get it stuck onto that panel. I didn't push too hard because I wanted to be able to move some of these around, and I'm glad I did that because there were a few that had kind of shifted and I wanted to get put back in place. And then I added some more adhesive on the back of those little flowers and adhered those around the wreath as well. I used some Distress Collage Medium in the matte finish to adhere some clear iridescent sequins in the middle of a few of those smaller flowers. And I put some of that same adhesive underneath of each of those flowers and leaves to make sure that they wouldn't move. I just wanted to make sure they were really nice and adhered so I didn't have any issues with them falling off. And that finishes the card for today. I love how this turned out. I don't typically use just rhinestones in shaker windows, but I loved it. It was so beautiful. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and if you were interested, you can follow me on my Facebook and Instagram. Those are my page names, and I will see you again soon. Thank you. Bye.